I swirled the deep red wine in my glass, watching the way the dim light caught the reflections, giving it an almost hypnotic shimmer. The dining room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional clink of silverware, as Daniel finished his meal. He was always so composed, so maddeningly controlled. Everything about him, from the way he neatly cut his steak to the way he never let his emotions betray him, made me itch for a reaction. I leaned back in my chair, tilting my head as I studied him. "You know," I began, my tone deliberately casual, "my ex knew how to take control. You could learn a thing or two." I expected a shift in his expression, maybe a flicker of irritation. A tightening of the jaw. A glare. Something. Instead, Daniel merely finished chewing, dabbed his mouth with a napkin, and set it down beside his plate. Then, he looked at me with calm, unreadable eyes. "Good." His voice was steady, controlled. "Because you're homeless now. Let's see if he's strong enough to carry your broke ass." My stomach dropped. Daniel reached for his glass, taking a slow sip of water before adding, "I just mailed you the divorce papers." I let out a short laugh, expecting some kind of smirk, some indication that he was joking. "Very funny." His lips didn't even twitch. "I'm not joking." My heart started to pound in my chest, an ugly mix of shock and confusion bubbling up. I had expected a rise out of him, maybe a petty argument, but not this. Not calm, merciless retaliation. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice faltering just slightly. Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest, studying me like a puzzle he had already solved. "You think you can push me forever, Emma? You think I don't see what you're doing?" I swallowed hard. "What am I doing?" He tilted his head slightly, as if deciding whether I even deserved an answer. "Trying to make me feel small. Testing me. Seeing if I'll crawl after you, beg for your approval. But I don't play games, Emma." I forced a scoff, even as a deep unease settled into my bones. "Oh, please. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Am I?" His voice was soft, but there was an edge to it now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek white envelope, setting it on the table between us. "Since you like living on the edge so much, let's see how you like doing it alone." My fingers curled into fists beneath the table. "You're divorcing me over a single comment?" Daniel exhaled through his nose, shaking his head slightly. "This isn't about one comment, Emma. It's about the fact that you don't respect me. And I won't stay in a marriage where I have to prove my worth to my own wife." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words caught in my throat. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I had been testing him. Pushing him. Seeing how far I could go before he snapped. But I had underestimated him. I had mistaken his patience for weakness. And now, he was done. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Daniel shrugged, standing up and picking up his plate. "Not my problem anymore." The words cut through me like a blade. As he walked away, leaving me alone in the dimly lit dining room, reality began to sink in. I had played my game. And I had lost. The sound of Daniel's footsteps echoed down the hall, each one carrying him further away from me. My breath felt trapped in my chest, a sharp contrast to the smug confidence I had had just minutes ago. I had expected irritation, maybe even an argument that would end in some rushed, half-hearted apology from him. But I never thought he would simply walk away. The envelope still sat on the table, the sharp edges of my name printed on the front mocking me. My fingers twitched as I reached for it, hesitating only for a moment before I tore it open. The words blurred together at first, my mind refusing to process them. But one line cut through the haze with brutal clarity: petition for dissolution of marriage. A shiver ran through me. I knew Daniel was a man of action, but I never thought he'd go this far. Not over something so trivial. Or maybe it wasn't trivial at all. Maybe I had been chipping away at the foundation of our marriage for so long that I hadn't noticed the cracks until the whole damn thing collapsed. I pushed back from the table and stood, my legs unsteady beneath me. "This is just a bluff," I told myself. He's trying to scare me, to put me in my place. But deep down, I wasn't so sure. I found him in the bedroom, methodically unbuttoning his shirt, the way he always did before bed. As if nothing had happened. As if our entire marriage hadn't just been thrown into question. Daniel! I started, my voice softer now. Come on. Let's talk about this. He didn't stop undressing, didn't even look at me. We've been talking about this for months, Emma. You just never listened. His tone was so matter-of-fact, so detached, that it rattled me more than if he'd yelled. I took a step closer, my stomach nodding. You're seriously doing this? Over one stupid comment? Finally, he turned to me, his blue eyes steady. This isn't about one comment. This is about respect. Or rather, the complete lack of it. That's ridiculous. I shot back, frustration bubbling up. We've had fights before. You've never threatened to leave me. Daniel scoffed, shaking his head. That's because I thought there was still something worth saving. His words hit harder than I expected. Still something worth saving. As if I had already burned through every last chance. I swallowed hard. So that's it? You're just giving up on us? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his jaw. No, Emma. You gave up on us. You have for a long time. I just finally accepted it. The weight of his words pressed down on me, and for the first time, I felt something dangerously close to fear. He meant it. I crossed my arms, trying to maintain some semblance of control. And where exactly do you expect me to go? Daniel didn't hesitate. That's not my problem. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, come on, Daniel. You're really going to throw me out like I'm some stranger? He shrugged. You made it clear how unimpressed you are with me. Maybe your ex can take you in. Heat rushed to my face. That was a joke. No, it wasn't. His certainty left no room for argument. I opened my mouth, then closed it again, searching for the right words. Daniel, please. Let's just take a breath, okay? We don't have to do this tonight. His expression remained unreadable. No, Emma. We don't have to do this tonight. We had to do this a long time ago. I stared at him, hoping for some flicker of hesitation, some crack in his resolve. But there was none. He turned away, pulling a duffel bag from the closet. I'll stay at a hotel for the weekend. You have until Sunday to pack your things. The words sent a fresh wave of panic through me. Daniel. He cut me off with a look. Sunday, Emma? If you're still here, I'll have the locks changed. And just like that, the conversation was over. I watched in stunned silence as he zipped up his bag, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door without another word. I stood there, listening to the sound of his car engine roaring to life, and something inside me twisted painfully. I had wanted a reaction. I had wanted proof that he still cared enough to fight for me. Instead, I got my answer. I had lost. And now, I was truly alone. The house was eerily silent after Daniel left. I stood frozen in the middle of our bedroom, staring at the space he had just vacated, the finality of his words settling over me like a suffocating fog. Sunday. If you're still here, I'll have the locks changed. The weight of it pressed down on my chest. It was easy to pretend he wasn't serious, that this was just another argument that would fizzle out by morning. But deep down, I knew better. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who made empty threats. If he said something, he meant it. I swallowed hard, my fingers curling into the fabric of my shirt as my mind raced. What now? My pride screamed at me to pack my things, walk out that door with my head held high, and never look back. But where would I even go? My phone sat on the nightstand, its screen dark and ominous. I hesitated for a moment before finally reaching for it, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through my contacts. Who do I call? The first name that popped into my head was Nick. My ex. The one I had so carelessly thrown in Daniel's face. The one I had jokingly claimed was a better man than my husband. My stomach twisted at the thought. Did I really want to go down that road? I hovered over his number for a second before quickly locking my phone and tossing it onto the bed. No. That wasn't an option. Whatever problems I had, I wasn't about to crawl back to Nick out of desperation. But that didn't change the fact that I had nowhere to go. I sank onto the bed, gripping my forehead as frustration boiled inside me. How had I let things get this bad? When had I stopped appreciating Daniel, stopped seeing him for the man he was? The answer hit me like a slap. I had been selfish. I had tested him, pushed him, tried to make him prove something. What? I wasn't even sure anymore. Maybe I had wanted him to fight for me, to prove that I still mattered to him. Instead, I had gotten exactly what I asked for. I had pushed too far, and he had walked away. A lump formed in my throat as I thought back to the way he had looked at me, so calm, so resolute. There had been no hesitation, no second-guessing. Daniel was done. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. I glanced around the bedroom, my gaze landing on the open closet, the empty space where his duffel bag had been. The weight of what I had lost settled over me like a lead blanket. I could leave. Pack up whatever dignity I had left and disappear from his life. Or I could fight. The question was it already too late? The hours crawled by in suffocating silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind a chaotic storm of regret, anger, and desperation. I had spent so much time trying to provoke a reaction from Daniel, trying to push him into proving something to me, that I never stopped to think about what would happen if he finally walked away. And now here I was, alone. The house that once felt like home was now unfamiliar. It was too quiet without the sound of Daniel moving through it, without his steady presence keeping everything in place. Even the air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension I had created, and were now pressing it back onto me. I needed to do something. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts again. Not Nick. Not anyone who would only make this worse. My sister, Allison? No, she had her own life, and she'd see right through my excuses. My best friend, Rachel? Maybe. But what would I even say? Hey, I destroyed my marriage because I wanted attention. Can I crash at your place? I set the phone down, rubbing my hands over my face. I didn't want pity. I didn't want lectures. I wanted to fix this. But how? I thought about calling Daniel. Apologizing. Begging. But deep down, I knew that wouldn't work. He wasn't the kind of man to be manipulated by words. He had already made his decision. If I had any hope of undoing this, I needed to show him that I understood what I had done. My eyes drifted to the closet, to the row of neatly hung shirts and suits that Daniel had left behind. He had packed a bag, but he hadn't taken everything. That meant something, didn't it? If he truly wanted to erase me from his life, he would have cleared out completely. Hope flickered, fragile but present. I stood, determination settling into my bones. I had 2 days until Sunday. 2 days to prove to him that I wasn't the selfish woman he had walked away from. I didn't know if it would be enough. But I had to try. Morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a golden hue over the bedroom. The bed was untouched on Daniel's side, a stark reminder of the night he had chosen to spend elsewhere. I stared at the ceiling, exhaustion weighing on me, but my mind refused to rest. If I wanted to fix this, I had to act fast. I threw on a pair of jeans and an old sweater, my hands shaking slightly as I made my way downstairs. The house felt emptier than ever, but I forced myself to push past the heaviness in my chest. I had to stop dwelling and start doing. First, I needed a plan. I grabbed a notebook from the kitchen drawer and started listing out what had gone wrong. Not just with the fight, but with our marriage. Every time I dismissed Daniel's feelings, every moment I took his patience for granted, it was all there in black and white, staring back at me. Then I moved to the next page. What can I do? Clean the house. Make it feel like home again. Cook his favorite meal, something nostalgic. Find a way to show him I see him, that I value him. Something personal. It felt small, insignificant, but it was a start. By mid-afternoon, The house smelled like lemon and fresh linen. I had scrubbed every surface, vacuumed every rug, as if trying to cleanse the damage I had done. My muscles ached, but I didn't stop. I moved to the kitchen next, rolling up my sleeves and pulling out the ingredients for Daniel's favorite dish: rosemary garlic steak with mashed potatoes and roasted vegetables. The same meal we had on our second anniversary, when we couldn't afford a fancy restaurant but made the night special anyway. As the steak sizzled in the pan, my chest tightened with nerves. Would he even care? I glanced at my phone, wondering if I should text him. No. This had to be more than just words. He needed to see it. Then came the final step. The hardest one. I walked into our bedroom and pulled open the nightstand drawer on Daniel's side. My hands trembled as I sifted through old receipts, spare change, and a small box buried beneath it all. I recognized it immediately: his father's pocket watch. Daniel had always talked about how much it meant to him, how it was one of the last things his dad had given him before passing away. He had wanted to get it repaired for years but never found the time. I traced my fingers over the worn metal. This was it. Grabbing my keys, I headed out the door. If I could get the watch fixed before he came home, maybe, just maybe, it would be the gesture that showed him I understood. That I finally saw him. The old repair shop smelled like oil, dust, and time. A bell chimed as I stepped inside, clutching the pocket watch in my hand. The man behind the counter, an elderly gentleman with wire-rimmed glasses, barely looked up as he worked on a delicate timepiece under a magnifying glass. "Be with you in a moment," he muttered, his fingers steady despite his age. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat as I glanced around. The walls were lined with shelves full of clocks, some ticking softly, others frozen in silence. It felt symbolic, in a way. Some things could be repaired, others simply stopped working. When the old man finally turned to me, I placed the pocket watch on the counter carefully, as if handling something sacred. "Can you fix this?" I asked. He picked it up, inspecting the delicate engravings. "Well-made piece. Old, but not beyond saving." He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Means something to you?" I hesitated, then nodded. "It means everything to my husband," the man hummed, turning the watch over in his hands. "Then I'll make sure it's right." As he took it to the back, I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I knew a fixed pocket watch wouldn't erase everything I'd done, but it was a start. A real start. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. I stepped inside, inhaling the scent of rosemary and garlic. The meal I had prepared earlier was still warm in the oven. Everything was in place. Now, all I could do was wait. Minutes ticked by. Then an hour. Then, finally, the sound of tires crunching against the gravel. I shot up from the couch, smoothing my sweater as I moved toward the door. The lock clicked, and Daniel stepped inside, his gaze immediately scanning the house. He looked tired. His usual composure was still there, but I could see the wear behind his eyes. He glanced at the table, where the plates were set, the steak plated just the way he liked it. Then, his eyes found mine. "What's all this?" His voice was steady, but I could hear the guarded edge behind it. I swallowed hard. I wanted to show you that I see you. That I appreciate you." His expression didn't change. "Emma, a meal doesn't fix this." I nodded quickly, reaching into my coat pocket. "I know. But maybe this will help." I pulled out the pocket watch, now polished and gleaming. I held it out to him, watching as his eyes flickered with recognition. For the first time since that awful night, I saw something crack in his demeanor. Slowly, he reached for it, his fingers brushing against mine as he took it. His thumb ran over the engraving on the back, the initials of his father. He didn't say anything at first. He just stared at it, as if memories were flooding him all at once. "You got it fixed," he finally said, his voice quieter now. I nodded. "I know it doesn't change everything. But I wanted to do something that mattered to you." A long silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he exhaled, slipping the watch into his pocket. I don't know what this means yet, he admitted. But it's something. And for now, something was more than I could have hoped for. The silence stretched between us, thick and unyielding. Daniel's fingers brushed over the smooth surface of the pocket watch again, his expression unreadable. I wanted to say something, anything, to ease the tension, but every word felt inadequate. Finally, he exhaled, slipping the watch into his pocket. I don't know what this means yet, he admitted. But it's something. Something. I nodded, swallowing hard. I wouldn't push. Not yet. I made dinner, I said hesitantly, gesturing toward the table. His eyes flickered toward the neatly plated meal, steam still rising from the rosemary garlic steak. For a moment I saw a glimpse of something in his face, nostalgia, maybe? But just as quickly it was gone, replaced by that same wary detachment he'd carried since the night he walked out. You didn't have to do all this, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I wanted to. Another pause. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he sighed and pulled out a chair. All right. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. We ate in near silence. The scrape of cutlery against porcelain felt deafening in the quiet house. Every so often, I caught him watching me out of the corner of his eye, like he was trying to figure me out all over again. How was your day? I asked, attempting something close to normalcy. Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. Strange. Didn't expect to be sitting here tonight. Neither did I. I shifted, pushing the food around my plate. I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for coming back. His fork paused midair. Don't make this into something it's not, Emma. I'm here. That doesn't mean everything is fine. I nodded quickly. I know. I'm grateful. Daniel didn't respond. Instead, he took another bite, his jaw tight. The weight of everything unsaid pressed down on me. I wanted to tell him that I understood now, that I saw all the ways I had chipped away at the love he had for me. But words felt hollow when I had spent so long disregarding his. How long have you been planning this? He finally asked, nodding toward the meal, the cleaned-up house, the repaired watch. I hesitated. Since you left. His eyes narrowed slightly. You had 2 days, Emma. 2 days to realize what you've been doing for years. The accusation stung, but I didn't flinch. I had no right to. No, I admitted. I've known for a long time. I just didn't want to face it. Daniel leaned back in his chair, studying me. And now you do? I nodded. Yeah. I do. He let out a slow breath, rubbing his temple. I don't know if that's enough. A lump formed in my throat, but I forced myself to nod. I know. Another long pause. Then, finally, he set his fork down and pushed his plate back slightly. I'm staying at a hotel tonight. My heart clenched. Daniel. He shook his head. No, Emma. I'm not just walking back and like nothing happened. I swallowed my desperation. Okay. I understand. He stood, grabbing his coat from the back of his chair. Before he turned, he hesitated. The watch, it really does mean a lot. Thank you for that. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close. But it was something that I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept replaying the conversation over and over. The way Daniel's eyes had softened, just a little, when he held his father's watch. The way his voice had carried something close to regret, even if he wasn't ready to admit it. I wasn't giving up. The next morning, I called into work, telling them I needed time off. It didn't matter what excuse I used. For once, I had something far more important to focus on. Daniel needed to see that I was serious. That I was willing to change, not just for him, but for myself. So I started with something small. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to my messages with Rachel. Me, I need to talk. In person. The response came within minutes. Rachel, I was wondering when you'd reach out. Meet me at the Beanery at 11. I hesitated before typing back. Me, thank you? Rachel had always been blunt, sometimes brutally so. If anyone could hold up a mirror to my faults, it was her. The beanery was crowded, the air thick with the smell of espresso and fresh pastries. I spotted Rachel immediately, sitting by the window with her arms crossed, a skeptical look already on her face. Well, look who finally decided to crawl out of her own mess, she said as I sat down. I winced. Yeah. I deserve that. Rachel took a sip of her coffee. You deserve a lot more than that. But let's start with why you're here. I took a deep breath. I screwed up. With Daniel. And I need to fix it. She arched a brow. And what exactly made you realize that? The fact that he finally left? The bluntness stung, but I nodded. Yes. I guess I never thought he'd actually go through with it. Rachel shook her head. You took him for granted, Emma. You pushed and pushed until he had no choice. What did you think was going to happen? I don't know, I admitted, my voice quiet. Maybe I thought he'd always be there. That he'd put up with it because he loved me. Rachel scoffed. Love has limits, Emma. You found his. I bit my lip, looking down at my untouched coffee. I know I can't undo everything overnight. But I need to start somewhere. Rachel leaned back, studying me. And what do you want from me? Honesty. She snorted. You won't like it. I don't care. Rachel's gaze softened slightly. Fine. Then here's my advice. Stop trying to fix things with grand gestures. You think one fancy meal and a repaired watch is enough? That's not what he wants, Emma. He wants to know you've actually changed. I swallowed. How do I prove that? Rachel sighed. You stop making this about proving something. You stop thinking about winning him back, and start focusing on being a better version of yourself. And if, in time, that means he wants to come back? Great. But if not? I looked away. Then I have to accept it. Rachel nodded. Exactly. I sat back in my chair, my chest feeling painfully tight. Could I really do that? Could I truly change, even if it meant losing Daniel forever? I had no choice. It was time to find out. Rachel's words lingered in my mind long after I left the coffee shop. You stop making this about proving something. You stop thinking about winning him back and start focusing on being a better version of yourself. That was what I had to do. But how? I had spent so long treating Daniel's patience like an unlimited resource. I had chipped away at it piece by piece, assuming it would always be there. Now, I was standing in the wreckage of my choices, and for the first time, I had to ask myself a terrifying question. Who am I without him? That question gnawed at me as I walked back to my car, the weight of the past pressing on my shoulders. I didn't want to be the person who took people for granted anymore. I didn't want to be the woman who only realized the value of what she had after she lost it. I needed to do better. And that started with looking at my own reflection. Without the safety net of Daniel's love beneath me, I spent the rest of the afternoon doing something I had avoided for far too long. Cleaning up my life. Not just our house, not just Daniel's things, but the emotional clutter I had been ignoring. I went to our bedroom, opening my closet and staring at the mess inside. Over the years, I had accumulated so much. Clothes I never wore. Shoes that hurt my feet but looked good in pictures. Trinkets I had bought in passing moments of impulse. I started pulling things out, making piles. Keep. Donate. Trash. At first, it was just things, items that no longer had a purpose. But then I found things that made me stop. A forgotten anniversary card Daniel had given me 2 years ago, the handwriting inside careful and deliberate. To my Emma, my best friend, my heart. I don't say it enough, but you are everything to me. My hands trembled. I had barely even read the card when he gave it to me. I had probably mumbled a distracted, "Thank you," before setting it aside, thinking he already knew how I felt. Had I ever even told him how much he meant to me? Tears blurred my vision as I ran my fingers over the faded ink. I couldn't change the past. But I could stop running from the truth. And part of that meant accepting that Daniel might never come back. That night, I sat on the couch staring at my phone. I hadn't heard from Daniel since last night. No texts. No calls. No indication that he was even thinking about me. I had told myself I wouldn't reach out. That I would give him space. But I also knew that if I let too much time pass, this distance between us would turn into permanence. I took a deep breath and typed a message. Me. I know I can't fix everything overnight. But I just wanted to say that I hear you. I see you. And I understand why you left. I stared at the words, debating whether to hit send. My heart pounded, knowing that whatever happened next was out of my hands. Finally, I pressed my thumb to the screen. Sent. Seconds passed. Then a minute. Then 2. Nothing. I exhaled shakily, setting the phone down. Maybe he wouldn't respond. Maybe he wasn't ready. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't seeking a reaction. I had said what needed to be said. And that had to be enough. The silence was suffocating. I stared at my phone, willing it to light up with a response from Daniel. But the minutes stretched into an hour, and the screen remained dark. He had seen my message, at least I assumed he had. But the lack of a response made my stomach twist. I had told myself that I wasn't looking for a reaction, that I had sent the message because it needed to be said, not because I needed a reply. But now, in the emptiness of our home, I realized just how much I had been relying on hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance. I forced myself to put the phone down and step away from it. I needed to stop obsessing. I needed to keep moving forward. I spent the next day trying to focus on things that didn't involve Daniel. I went for a walk around the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in months. I cleaned up the guest room, reorganized the shelves, and finally tackled the pile of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. But no matter how much I distracted myself, my thoughts kept drifting back to him. I wondered what he was doing. If he was thinking about me. If he was struggling with this as much as I was. Or if he was already preparing to move on. That thought hit me harder than I expected. Could I really handle it if he decided this was the end? I didn't know. But I had to be ready for that possibility. It wasn't until late that night, when I had finally convinced myself to stop waiting, that my phone buzzed. I nearly knocked over my glass of water scrambling for it. Daniel, I don't know what to say to that. My breath caught. It wasn't much, but it was something. I hesitated, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I didn't want to push him. Didn't want to say the wrong thing. Me, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. Another pause. Then, after a few minutes, Daniel, I appreciate that. A lump formed in my throat. I blinked rapidly, staring at those 3 words as if they held the power to change everything. They didn't. But they meant he was still here. Still listening. And for now, that was enough. Daniel's last message replayed in my mind over and over. I appreciate that. 3 simple words. Not forgiveness. Not an invitation back into his life. But not finality either. It was a door left open, barely. I wasn't naive enough to think that meant everything would go back to the way it was. But at least he was still willing to acknowledge me. That was more than I had expected. And now, I had a choice. I could push, try to force something more out of him, risk undoing whatever fragile thread of communication was left between us. Or I could let it be. Let him come to me when, if, he was ready. For once in my life, I chose patience. But patience didn't mean waiting idly. If I wanted any chance at rebuilding my life, with or without Daniel, I had to keep moving forward. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and really looked at myself. Not just at my reflection, but at the person I had become. Had I always been like this? So careless with the people who loved me? So blind to my own faults? No. I used to be someone Daniel adored, someone he trusted. Somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of that person. And I wanted her back. Not just for Daniel, but for me. So I started small. I took a long, slow breath and grabbed my phone, not to text Daniel, but to call my sister, Allison. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. Emma? Hearing her voice sent a wave of guilt crashing over me. I had shut her out for so long, convinced I didn't need anyone. But now, I realized how much I had pushed everyone away, not just Daniel. Hey, I said softly. I know it's been a while, but can we talk? There was a pause, then a sigh. Yeah. We can talk. It wasn't immediate warmth, but I hadn't expected that. Just like with Daniel, I had to earn it. Over the next few weeks, I kept working on myself. I met with Allison for coffee, listening, really listening, to the ways I had hurt her over the years. I reached out to old friends I had neglected. I even started therapy, something I had always brushed off as unnecessary. And slowly, bit by bit, I started to feel different. Lighter. More in control of my own happiness, instead of relying on Daniel to provide it for me. But he was never far from my thoughts. We hadn't spoken since that last message. I didn't reach out again, and neither did he. It was agonizing, not knowing where we stood. But I reminded myself that this time, it wasn't about winning him back. It was about becoming someone worthy of being loved again. I was folding laundry one evening when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look, assuming it was Allison or Rachel checking in. But when I saw Daniel's name on the screen, my heart nearly stopped. Hands shaking, I answered. Hello? For a moment, all I could hear was his steady breathing. Then, finally, hey. That one word carried so much weight. I swallowed hard. Hey. Another pause. Then, I saw your car at that little bookstore on Main Street today. I blinked, caught off guard. Oh. Yeah, I was there for a while. I've been reading a lot lately. Yeah? His voice was softer than I remembered. What kind of books? I hesitated, then smiled a little. One's about growth, I guess. Daniel let out a quiet chuckle. That's new. Yeah, I admitted. I'm trying something different. He was silent for a long time, and I let it be. I didn't rush to fill the space, didn't push for answers. And maybe that was what made him say what he did next. Emma, I don't know where this is going. I don't know if I can ever go back to the way things were. My stomach twisted. I know. But, he exhaled. I think I'd like to see you. To talk. In person. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I blinked them away. I'd like that too. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a promise. But it was a step. And this time, I wouldn't take it for granted.